invite Volodymyr Demchyshyn, who is the Minister for Energy and Coal Industry of Ukraine. The floor is yours. Good afternoon, colleagues. My greetings to everybody. Here are the documents. I'm glad to see you all. I know there's a lot of questions addressed to me. I see that a lot of my actions are now within the public domain. We have to discuss this. I don't see anything bad in this. I guess the public has to understand what's going on and be active participants in the process that are taking place in Ukraine. I think this was the goal of Maidan itself, so this is a good phenomenon. I understand that everyone is here in order to ask about the contract signed with a contract for delivery of electricity to Crimea. I know there's a lot of questions about the public discussion that flared up. I'm sure that we will talk about this, but at once I would like to say that I've got the instruction and the press has published this, and I officially responded to this by noon, and I think that most of the questions have very simple explanations, and I think that the issues, the questions that are being raised are very often at the edge of lack of information, so everything is understood. The electricity was delivered to Crimea over the last 18 months, independent on what were the relations. The same Ukrenergo was delivering electricity to the state company, to DTEK Krimenergo, and DTEK was selling this to the Crimean company that was delivering electricity to the territory of Crimea, according to the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers that was signed in mid-2014. All those decisions were taken through official channels. Prior to this, there was an intermediary, DTEK, and its Crimean subsidiary that was buying electricity from Ukrenergo. But in reality, the way was much more complicated, and after half a month has passed since they stopped the delivery, and the general debt was almost 150 million, and the presence of this intermediary was complicating the payments. So now there's no intermediary, and I have to assure you that the organization is much simpler now. Okay, politically this is problematic. There's a lot of people who say you shouldn't do this, but this is a political issue, and those are our citizens. We are fighting for them, so I would not start a political discussion now. As for the contract, you saw the comments that there are some obligations or in the Russian importing contract, independently on whether we buy, take and pay, but the schedule of delivery is there in the contract. Every day it is being confirmed anew. The sides are determining the scope and the schedule of delivery every day. And every day you can change those requirements. And if they do not correspond to economic realities, there's a lot of factors, and the sites can refuse to fulfill the contract. So there's no principle take and pay. The schedule is confirmed every day, so I don't understand what we're talking about. But there were also questions about the delivery or supply, the supply of electricity along the lines that the grid that is not controlled by the Ukrainian side, but in principle the issue is understood. But I want to tell you that between Ukraine and Russia there's a agreement about the parallel work of two energy grids. We remember that we all came out of one single grid. And the treaty was signed in 2007, and all the lines of electricity supply were determined there, where the exchange of energy takes place between Ukrainian and Russian systems. And those same conditions were transferred to the commercial contract of Ukrinterenergo. Nothing new has happened. Yes, there are two lines that are on the territory not controlled by the Ukrainian authorities. And this is the issue that I've been looking into for the last week. I've done some things so that they are excluded from this list. So in reality, first, as I told you, it's the same that we had before. Nothing new was adopted, just the same list that was agreed in in other contracts. It was impossible to use other conditions at the time being, because there was an active contract between Russia and Ukraine, and technical conditions were agreed between technical operators. And the work to exclude those lines is still ongoing, and this does not depend on this contract. This depends on relations between the parties. This is a global strategy.
So now to say that the agreement, this contract worsens some relations wouldn't be objective. Talking about the fines, I've mentioned that the schedules are approved every day, and the sites can refuse from these agreements. If we feel that at the moment we need electricity from Russia because we don't have enough coals, our warehouses are empty, there's no coal there, and we need energy, we receive it. Automatically we look at commercial terms. If commercial terms are profitable, we buy electricity. You saw that in the contract, all the prices, I don't want to quote them. These are commercial terms, but these are beneficial terms. Ukraine can be buying electricity from a neighboring country, and that's good for our market. We supply to Crimea with quite a big margin. So compared to the price at which we buy, these are contracts which are not related. The volumes are different, the terms are different, and even the procedures of approving are different. It would be wrong to say that one of the contracts harms state interests, and also some of the terms. There was a reference to federal counting. But if we go back, look into the past and remember how we were surviving in the end of December, there were these disconnections. The railway would stop. Some people would get stuck in the elevators. The hospitals were disconnected. There were so many complaints. We had to urgently resolve that. At that moment, to bring coal that was needed, we physically did not have the coal. And the only quick solution could be import. It was a difficult, complicated process, but that was done. We survived all the holidays without disconnections, without cutting off any electricity, because now we do not cut off electricity in any part of Ukraine. I believe that's good. But when we resolve one problem, we are faced with another political problem. I understand those who say don't want to get a single kilowatt from this other side, but that is a very difficult political discussion. I don't want to have it here. At that moment, the problem was resolved, and now it supports the whole situation. The contract, there were these fan-type disconnections. Ukrinterenergo was planning to supply to Ukrainian supply, who was to supply further. Then was this problem with the intermediary who wasn't paying significant amounts, plus the tender for finding the best participant who would supply. It was not held. So for that, the decision was needed. I addressed the Cabinet of Ministers, and the decision was made that we can supply electricity irrespective to who, but Interenergo the same day. They had negotiations and they signed the agreement. And at that moment, the working version of this contract was the same as was signed between Russian company and DTEC. There were certain things that were then corrected, and there was a reference to this county. That's a technical mistake. There's no such a reference in the contract. I have here the original of the contract. With all the responsibility, I can tell you there were several working versions, but the final version, which is signed, has no reference to that. That's a confidential document, but this version was submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers. I believe that that issue has been resolved. As to the cost, they were saying that electricity is supplied at a cheaper price, but this is not so. They're comparing not comparable values. The previous agreement or contract of the TEC with Crimea had VAT included. Now Crimea is recognized as the free economic zone, and any supplies there have zero VAT. So the price without VAT, it was 5% lower than now. So the conditions have improved. You have to compare what could be compared. I believe that agreement is better. I don't know. I mentioned the fines, penalties. If we can refuse from these volumes on the annual basis, then what are we talking about? If you have any questions, basically, I'm ready to answer the questions not just on this contract. We can discuss the situation in energy sector, the situation with reforms. I'm ready to answer. I'm always ready to talk to people. I understand that you may have many questions about strategy, tactics, and any other questions. Ukraine TV channel. The question is, as to purchase of the electricity for continental part of Ukraine, I understand that we approve the schedules every day, but what is the cost? And the second question, Ukrainian companies complain that our units are stopped, but at the same time we buy Russian energy. The price is a commercial secret. It was published. Everyone saw that. I shouldn't probably quote it and violate the terms of the contract. But this figure is smaller than the cost of electricity in the Ukrainian market. It's smaller than in the Ukrainian market. The cost of thermal generation, which we replace by electricity from Russia, is more than 85 kopecks. But the price at which we buy is lower. Definitely, the contract is a complicated instrument. There are some exchange differences, VAT, and the mechanic of the contract itself, but this contract is profitable. We buy cheaper than we sell. I don't see any problem with the contract itself. The schedules are approved every day. As to the disconnection of Ukrainian units, we are trying to accumulate as much coal as possible. The problem with coal is very unique. Many people are talking about that without understanding the details. Some people say there is coal in some of the coal mines. It's down there in ATO zone. Some people say, yes, we have it on Ukrainian territory, but of different grades. Half of our generation operates on anthracite group of coal, which has its own specific technological and technical characteristics, and the G type, and we have enough G-type coal. We produce about 2 million tons of that, but we burn less than 1.5 million tons. But the G-type coal cannot be used for the units which use anthracite-type coal. And now the Institute is drafting the project on transferring the anthracite-type units to gas-type coal. I understand that this could be done within several months. Till the next heating season, we will find a solution without any big investments. This could be done in half a year. And I believe that the next heating season will be different. But talking about disconnections, with the import, there are many problems. And what if? It's easier to so that our task is to accumulate, and I do support you. Ukrainian power plants are to operate because they produce Ukrainian product for grivnas if they do not import the coal from abroad. But if it is cheaper for us to bring electricity, plus we can accumulate the coal that we do not have. And during the previous week, we additionally accumulated more than 100,000 tons of coal. These are big figures, but we burn 78,000 a day. So this is a lengthy process, and I want to tell you that till the end of the heating season will be in very difficult conditions and to say that we have done.
Дуже багато факторів.
Yes, there's quite a lot of factors, and the opportunity to bring in the coal and the technical state of the stations, which is very problematic. We saw in December how the stations had to be repaired. They technically could not perform the function to produce the electricity, and this is the huge problem. I am sure that we have to apply efforts so that prior to the next heating season, we conduct all those technical works so that our stations are ready, prepared, and we don't have to continue repairs when they have to work. But we have to work in very complicated conditions, and many people say that I have, within the really war conditions to try to buy the commodities from our enemies at a market price. You have to take this into account. You said that it is more profitable in Russia, 85 kopecks, but the Russian manufacturers at Radio Rare said that for them the cost is 79 kopecks. Well, this is a very simple task as far as price is concerned. The National Commission for Regulating of Prices is a player at this market. You remember that the cost of this contract is defined by the National Regulation Committee. So the 85 was the price determined for January. In February, the price will become different. So you have to go to the National Committee for Regulation of Energy Prices to ask about the price. I'm sure that the price is profitable for the market because we have to diversify and to provide the market with the volume that we don't have at the moment. I can go and sell a ton of coal for 10 kopecks to someone. But can you tell us this, say that this 10 kopecks is a price for a ton of coal? There's another question. First of all, continuing the question that was posed, can you responsibly tell us that during the night minimum we do not unload the blocks that work on coal mark G? All those processes are taken place in strict accordance to the rules of exploitation of the stations. There are technological rules, and every action was agreed a lot of time ago. If you tell me that I have changed the rules today, I would understand you, but this did not happen. Well, but we have an additional volume during the night. And they stand still. The 4 stations that work on anthracite are standing still. Are we, according to the rules that exist, we do switch off some blocks, some units? Look at this scale of consumption of energy over the day from 18 to 24 megabyte, and the fluctuation is very great. So of course the stations are switched on and off, and this is a great problem. Over the last 4 months I'm trying to level this scale, this chart. If we don't switch the stations off and on, we will be able to level the schedule. If the industry can adopt to the night schedule, then please do this, because the night tariff is 40% cheaper. According to the rules, the supplier has to inform us of the schedule of delivery, but how can they do this if they supply the electricity to Crimea? You know, if you have agreed that tomorrow you will buy a computer, you have corroborated your condition, and if you are later violating this contract, you know, every day they are confirming their schedule for the day after tomorrow. And within this framework, they have to perform their obligations, because counterparts have to, subcontractors have to understand what they are doing. And this is happening notwithstanding day offs or noon or usual or working days. Okay, but can you tell us, how could you have it in the contract that the tertiary court is in Russia and the payment is in Russian currency? Look, I think that there are more complicated processes here. This is an interstate contract, international contract between two subjects, a Ukrainian and a Russian subject, and the treaty contract is signed. Well, you can of course sign it in dollars, but the correlation between hryvnia and ruble is higher than with the dollar, than the probability of exchange rate differences. If we sign the ruble contract, then the risk is lesser. You don't have to buy dollars in order to pay. This is also banking procedures and currency procedures. And I think that this was an adequate decision. So yes, it's about rubles, about the tertiary court. Yes, this is a strange thing, and I gave them a task, you know, during the talks, and the treaty was signed on the basis of the Krim-Energo contract. They understood that there is a lack of time, and they were raising this issue, and there's a understanding that this point will be changed. And I put forward a task for them, and I feel that this task will be fulfilled. Before the 2nd of February, this point, this clause will be changed. I propose a Ukrainian legislation for them, but, well, it's not an issue if they finalize it with a reference to Stockholm arbitrage.
But there were just fines imposed on only one party, but on the one hand these are floating, on the other one it's stable. Where's the discrimination? If we do not like that we receive electricity cheap, because the prices, when it changes, like in January, the prices for COPEX cheaper than indicative price. If we do not like commercial terms, they can refuse from that agreement. If we do not like the volume, they do not take it. This is just the desire to say there are some problems there. There are some discrepancies. If they can control the risk, then where's the problem? Union. Could you please say, from the moment you were appointed, all the time the activity of the Ministry of Energy is accompanied by some scandals. And we have heard many times from the Prime Minister some accusations Why is that happening? Can you tell us? Do you analyze the situation? Because what we see from a side that something unrealistic is happening. And also you said or you hinted that the Prime Minister it's about the contract for import of electricity from Russia. You said that in the contract that's the issue of how well you are informed. That's the first question, no, that's the second. And the second, please comment on today's statement of Mr. Miller about gas. That from the 1st of April, Ukraine is deprived of all the, will not have any more discounts and the winter package will be cancelled. What will we do in this case? On the first question, I wouldn't be trying to see some conspiracy, some complicated story. The ministry is quite a complicated issue because now 35 coal mines, 50,000 people, and the subsidies were cancelled. They are all in difficult situation because they understand that many of their coal mines cannot now operate, and that is very complicated. So every day I have a deputy who works on that every day. We look at coal mines, at the possibility to reduce the cost. We look at how to balance the finances of every coal mine, maybe add some funding. And without that, we understand that the energy sector, well, energy sector is part of, well, that is part of producing, of generating electricity. 6 million which state coal mines produce, that is a small part of the market because the market is more than 60 million, but that is the volume without which we can only aggravate the problem with the electricity. Import is a good idea, but that's currency that we have to pay, logistics, the problems that we see, someone can stop at the borderline, but production, domestic production is good for security. Then oil and gas complex, it's dependence on the import. We produce only half of what we need. 45% is our domestic production plus reverse transportation, about 30%, and the rest is delivered by Russia. Russians understand, they are disappointed that Russia consumes less and less. Talking about the agreement with Gazprom, there was a winter package till the end of March. Basically, everyone understands that that was this agreement. The price of oil, and based on that, the price of gas was calculated. The price for oil fell down. Now some of the thermal power plants switch to mazout. Usually that's 30% more expensive than gas. But at the moment it's different because the price for oil went down from $80 to $45, and gas also the price dropped because we buy from Europe on the spot market, but the decrease of gas is like 10%. That's talking about gas, and that's why we do have the problem. The previous negotiations were very difficult. Now we're trying to have full-fledged negotiations with attracting the European partners. You see what are the statements that we steal gas, that they want to develop new projects. That's clear. Objectively, These are adequate market relations. People are trying to get what they want. These are negotiations. Negotiations are just starting. There are many participants, and there are new faces from European Union, from Ukrainian side. I can tell you these are just first steps. To say what the terms will be is too early. But the market in any case is working for our benefit. The decrease of oil price helps us be sure that the gas price will be lower than the one that was mentioned before. I answered the second part. The ministry is very big. I have 160 companies, large companies under it. It's the empire. Energatom, 80 billion kilowatt, Neftegas.
Just the deficit of budget there was last year 110 billion. This is materiality very huge. Ukrgazdobыча, Ukrenergo, very complicated processes inside. They're champions of the Ukrainian economy and systemic operators. Of course, they have a lot of their own interests and they fight for their interests. As soon as I start to say that we should cancel some benefits, it is very complicated. You know, we have to apply for 2 or 3 times for this. We're changing the auction rules. We are replacing people. Well, Aivaras, the Minister of Economy, said that we should select people publicly. Well, let's see. Of course, this is a complicated process, and because it makes the procedure lengthier, you have to have a personnel, human resources process. I explained to you during our last meeting that I had to clean up the team. And there's a lot of claims against the contract. And I can assure you that there will be changes in personnel. But the minister cannot proofread every contract. I do apply every effort to check everything, but of course if there are some disadvantages, then I have to be responsible for this. I ask the representative of Interfax not to cry out from the audience. You know, if you throw sticks at a fruit tree, then there are some fig tree, then there are some fruits that you can take from this. But you and your colleagues understand very well that a lot of material that's been spread over in the market is lobbyism. And I have spoken a lot about lobbyism and monopolism, and probably this is my main task over the period while I can do something. This is the fight for adequate market relations in Ukraine so that the quality of a commodity is adequate as compared to the money, and so that no one says that someone gains super profits. The situation is very simple. If the companies are performing their banal functions to provide for the competition on the market, there won't be any claims against them. Of course, we understand that there are sectors where you have some natural monopolies where there cannot be any competition, but there are regulators for those sectors, and the regulators have to draw understandable and transparent conditions and declare them to all the companies and agree them. I'll tell you more. Recently, we have drawn some key aspects that we are discussing with the members, with participants of the industry, and we explain our vision of the market, for instance, of oil and gas market within 2 years. what is reflected in the law on the gas market, which is agreed with the European Energy Community, and I hope that we will agree this on the Cabinet of Ministers session tomorrow, and we will submit it to the Parliament. This regulates the rules of price formation on the oil and gas market. And you know, the same processes are taking place in the electricity market, and the same pertains to coal. We have canceled the benefits, and we have fundamentally changed the sector. And now we have the problem what to do with the people, what to do with the loss-making mines. Now we see that Ukraine depends much on outside delivery of fuel. Maybe the methods that we are using are not the most efficient ones. Let's see. Let's look for new methods. Gasification of coal, but all this is an active work. And the last question is from the Wall Street Journal. Please explain the situation with the debt of Naftogaz. The Russians claim that it amounts to $2.4 billion. Look, the total debt of Naftogaz, as far as I remember, is a little bigger, to put it mildly. But what is the essence of the question? They they quote the Russian side. You know, there are certain obligations to third parties that they are fulfilling, yes, sometimes with the help from the government, and the budget has additional emission of securities that will be carried out. 31.5 billion emission into the capital of Naftogaz, at least in this version of the budget. Maybe it will be changed. Of course, there's a lot of processes around Naftogaz. IMF is here. They are talking now, and they are very much worried about the budget of Naftogaz and deficit of this budget. They are conducting measures, and there are internal processes of saving and minimizing the disbalances about the price formation on the market and prepayment for industrial enterprises so that the cash discrepancies are less. So there's a lot of technical measures to balance the budget of Naftogaz, including the work with the tariffs. Okay, thank you. And the briefing of the ambassador of Japan and Ukraine is within 5 minutes.